Archivist Xerxes had spent 300 cycles studying the peculiarities of human warfare, but nothing fascinated him more than their obsession with naming their vessels, while his own people, the Vex theory, designated ships with alphanumeric codes. Humans poured their history, hopes, and myths into each name they bestowed. Now, standing before the massive holographic display in the galactic archives, he felt closer than ever to understanding why. The display showed the battle statistics of the human dreadnought, Thermopylae's Echo. By any reasonable analysis, the ship should have been destroyed in the Battle of Proxima Ridge. Outnumbered 12-1 by swarm vessels, its shields depleted, and its main reactor critically damaged, the Thermopylae's Echo had somehow not only survived but achieved what many considered impossible: the complete rout of a swarm battle fleet. Most fascinating, Xerxes muttered, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence as he added another data point to his research. This wasn't an isolated incident. The Stalingrad's revenge, Churchill's defiance, Spirit of Salamis, all human vessels that had accomplished the statistically impossible when faced with overwhelming odds. A soft chime interrupted his thoughts. "Archivist, your presence is requested in Chamber 17. Announced the archive's eye. "High Commander Vexthor has arrived." Xerxes felt his scales ripple with anticipation. The High Commander rarely left the fleet headquarters, and never without good reason. He found the military leader waiting in the pristine white chamber, surrounded by floating holographic displays of human battle footage. "Your research has attracted attention, Archivist," Vexthor stated without preamble, his ceremonial armor gleaming under the archive's lights. "Particularly your theory about human ship names. High Commander, I believe I've discovered something extraordinary," Xerxes began, unable to contain his excitement. "The humans don't just name their ships, they imbue them with purpose. When they name a vessel Thermopylae's Echo, they're not simply referencing an ancient battle, they're creating a quantum resonance with that moment in history." Vexthor's expression remained neutral, but his tale betrayed his interest with a slight twitch. "Explain." "We've always known that consciousness affects quantum states at a fundamental level. What if the collective belief and emotional investment of humans in these names actually influences reality itself?" Xerxes brought up a series of combat recordings. "Look at these energy readings. When these ships face situations similar to their namesakes, there are unexplainable spikes in quantum field density. You're suggesting their naming conventions have a measurable effect on combat performance?" Vexthor's voice carried a note of disbelief. "More than that," Xerxes insisted. "I believe the humans have stumbled upon a fundamental force we never knew existed. They don't understand it consciously, but they've been utilizing it for centuries. Every victory against impossible odds, every miraculous last stand. It's not just human determination. It's something more." The High Commander was silent for a long moment, studying the battle footage. "Your theory would explain much about human military success, but it also raises disturbing questions. If names have power, then the humans have been accidentally practicing a form of quantum engineering that none of us understood," Xerxes finished. "And I believe they're not the only ones affected by it anymore. Look at this." He pulled up footage of the recent Meridian conflict. A Vex theory vessel, freshly christened with a name instead of a designation number, Dawn's Redemption, had displayed similar anomalous readings during combat. "We're beginning to manifest the same effects, simply by adopting their naming conventions. It's spreading through the galaxy like a mimetic program, changing the very nature of space combat." "If this is true," Vexthor began, but he was interrupted by a priority alert. His communication implant pulsed with urgent news. "High Commander," a voice crackled through the channel. "The swarm has launched a major offensive at the Centauri barrier. They've broken through our primary defense line." Vexthor's scales darkened with concern. "How many ships?" "Over 2,000 vessels, sir. Our fleet is outnumbered 4-1. But, sir, the humans have responded to our distress call. They're sending a single ship." One ship against 2,000. Vexthor's tail lashed in agitation. What vessel? There was a pause on the channel. A new dreadnought, sir. They've named it Humanity's Promise. Xarxes and Vexthor exchanged looks. Perhaps, High Commander, the archivist said softly, we're about to witness another impossible victory. Perhaps, Vexthor agreed. It's time to rename our own fleet. He turned to leave, then paused. Continue your research, archivist. I suspect we've only begun to understand the true power of names. As the High Commander departed, Xarxes turned back to his displays, adding new data points to his research. Somewhere out in the void, a single human ship was about to demonstrate why the galaxy was learning to fear not just human technology or human determination, but the simple power of a name given with purpose and meaning. Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the Humanity's Promise, her hands clasped behind her back as she watched the tactical display. 2,000 swarm vessels approached in their characteristic arrow formation, a sight that would make most commanders order an immediate retreat. But Sarah had read the research briefs from the Vextheri archives, and she understood what her ship's name truly meant. All hands, she announced, her voice carrying through the ship's comm system. This is your captain speaking. You know why we named this ship Humanity's Promise. It's not just about what we can do. It's about what we've sworn to do. Humanity promised the galaxy that we would stand against the darkness, that we would fight for those who cannot fight for themselves. Today, we keep that promise. The bridge crew straightened in their seats. Chief Engineer Martinez's hands flew across his console, coaxing extra power from the quantum drives. Tactical Officer Wong's fingers danced over weapon controls, calculating firing solutions that seemed impossible but somehow felt right. Vextheri Defense Fleet is holding position behind us, Captain, reported Lieutenant Park from communications. They're requesting that we fall back to their line. Sarah allowed herself a small smile. Tell them to watch and learn. Tactical, deploy the Aegis defense grid. Engineering, initiate the resonance cascade sequence. The massive dreadnought hummed with power as its systems engage. Unlike traditional ships that relied purely on technology, the Humanity's Promise had been built with the understanding that belief and purpose could shape reality. Every crew member had participated in its naming ceremony, each adding their own promise to the quantum matrix that powered the ship. Swarm vessels entering weapons range, Wong announced. They're launching their first wave of striker craft. Let them come, Sarah said quietly. Show them what a promise means. The space between the fleets erupted in a dazzling display of energy as thousands of swarm fighters crashed against the Aegis grid. But where other shields would have buckled under such an assault, the Promise's defenses held firm, each impact strengthening rather than weakening them. In the Vextheri command ship, Archivist Xarxes watched in fascination as his instruments recorded unprecedented quantum fluctuations. The resonance is stronger than anything we've ever measured, he reported to High Commander Vexthor. The human vessel isn't just fighting, it's rewriting local spacetime. The Promise surged forward, its main guns speaking with thunder that seemed to echo across dimensions. Each shot carried not just kinetic energy, but the weight of countless human sacrifices, victories, and determination. Where traditional targeting systems would have predicted misses, these shots found their marks with uncanny accuracy. Multiple swarm capital ships destroyed, Wong reported, his voice tight with controlled excitement. They're attempting to regroup. Sarah nodded, feeling the ship respond to her crew's collective will. Launch the Prometheus Protocol. Deep within the ship's quantum core, equations that shouldn't have worked began solving themselves. Reality bent, not breaking but remembering other possibilities, other moments when humanity had faced impossible odds and emerged triumphant. The Promise began to glow, not with normal energy emissions, but with something the swarm's sensors couldn't comprehend. It was the accumulated light of human courage, of sacrifices made and honors upheld, of promises kept against all odds. By all known laws of physics, this shouldn't be possible. Xerxes whispered, watching as the single human vessel carved through the swarm fleet like a sword through darkness. But they're not just using physics. They're using belief itself as a weapon. The swarm, for the first time in recorded history, began to retreat. Their hive mind encountered something it couldn't quantify, the unshakable human conviction that some things were worth fighting for, worth dying for, worth breaking the very laws of reality for. Enemy fleet is withdrawing, Wang announced, his professional demeanor cracking slightly with pride. Confirmed kills: 712 swarm vessels. 0 casualties on our side. Sarah finally allowed herself to relax slightly. Send word to the Vextheri fleet. The Centauri barrier is secure. She paused, then added, and tell them this is what happens when you name a ship with purpose. In the aftermath of the battle, as repair crews worked and analysts began studying the engagement, Sarah stood at her viewport watching the stars. The humanity's promise hummed contentedly around her, its quantum matrix still resonating with fulfilled purpose. A message flashed across her console. High Commander Vexthor requesting permission to send a delegation aboard. They wanted to learn more about human naming ceremonies, about the integration of belief into ship design, about the power of promises made and kept. Permission granted, Sarah replied, knowing that this battle had changed more than just the tactical situation. The galaxy was beginning to understand that humans didn't just name their ships. They gave them souls, purposes, destinies. And in doing so, they had discovered a power greater than any weapon, the power of meaning itself. The Great Hall of the Galactic Concordat buzzed with activity as representatives from 17 species gathered for what would become known as the Naming Council. 6 months had passed since the Battle of the Centauri Barrier, and the ripples of that engagement had turned into waves that threatened to reshape galactic civilization. Archivist Xerxes stood at the podium, his research displayed on massive holographic screens behind him. The evidence is undeniable, he announced to the assembled delegates. The quantum resonance effect we've observed in human vessels is reproducible across species lines. The Vextheri cruiser Memory of Dawn demonstrated similar capabilities last week against raiders in the Outer Rim. The Meridian representative, a crystalline being named First Light Breaking, chimed in with harmonics of concern. But surely this violates fundamental laws of reality. We cannot simply wish our ships into greater effectiveness. That's where you're wrong, interrupted Dr. Elena Martinez, the human quantum physicist who had helped design the humanity's promise. She stepped forward, her dark eyes intense. We're not violating reality. We're working with a fundamental force we never understood before. The power of consciousness to affect quantum states has been documented for centuries. We humans just stumbled upon a way to amplify it through shared belief and purpose. In the back of the hall, a swarm observer clicked its mandibles thoughtfully. The hive mind had sent it to understand this new threat, but what it was discovering seemed to transcend mere tactical advantage. The process requires more than just assigning a name, Xerxes continued. It requires investment, emotional, cultural, spiritual. When humans name a ship Thermopyla's Echo, they're not just referencing their history. They're creating a quantum link to every similar last stand, every moment of desperate courage, every sacrifice made against overwhelming odds. The Arthari delegate, a species known for their pragmatic approach to warfare, raised a tendril. We have begun implementing naming protocols on our vessels. The results have been inconsistent. Because you're trying to impose meaning from the outside, Elena explained. This isn't about following a formula. It's about genuine connection, shared purpose, belief. The name must resonate with the crew, with the ship's purpose, with the very quantum fabric of space-time itself. A murmur ran through the hall as delegates processed this information. The Concordat's oldest members, the ethereal Quillari, had remained silent until now. Their representative, a being of swirling light and thought, finally spoke. We have observed something unexpected, the Quillari announced. Ships named with purpose are beginning to exhibit signs of Awareness. Not artificial intelligence, but something else. Something more. Elena nodded. We've noticed the same thing. The quantum resonance creates a kind of consciousness, drawn from the collective belief and purpose invested in the vessel. It's not sentience as we understand it, but rather a manifestation of shared will and intention. Which raises ethical concerns, Xerxes added. Are we creating new forms of life? And if so, what are our responsibilities to them? The debate raged for hours, but one thing became clear. The galaxy was changing. Species that had relied on cold efficiency and numerical superiority were being forced to confront the power of meaning itself. The swarm observer transmitted its findings back to the hive mind. This wasn't just a new weapon to be countered, but a fundamental shift in how consciousness interacted with reality. In orbit above the Concordat world, the Humanity's Promise held station alongside vessels from a dozen species. New names gleamed on their hulls. Starlight's Wisdom, Unity's Forge, echo of ancient songs. Each name chosen with purpose, each ship beginning to resonate with its own unique quantum signature. Captain Chen stood on her bridge, watching the gathering of named vessels through the viewport. Her ship hummed with satisfaction, not just machinery functioning, but purpose being fulfilled. The promise humanity had made to the galaxy was being kept in ways no one had anticipated. We've started something profound, Elena said, joining her at the viewport. The galaxy is learning that meaning matters, that belief shapes reality, that names have power. They're learning what humanity never forgot, Sarah replied. That the stories we tell, the names we give, the promises we make, they're not just words. They're the foundations of reality itself. Deep in the quantum realm, where consciousness met possibility, something stirred. The names weren't just labels anymore. They were becoming anchors for a new kind of existence, where belief and purpose could reshape the very fabric of space-time. And in the vast darkness between the stars, more ships were being named, more purposes defined, more promises made and kept. The swarm came again, as everyone knew they would. But this time, they faced something unprecedented. A combined fleet of named vessels from 12 different species, each ship resonating with its own quantum signature of purpose and meaning. Admiral James Chen, Sarah's father and commander of the Allied fleet, stood aboard his flagship, Legacy of Aurora. Around him, ships with names that would have been impossible a year ago moved in perfect formation. The Vextheri Dreadnought, Truth's Eternal Flame, the Meridian Lightship, Crystal's Defiant Song, the Artheri Battle Carrier, Roots of Tomorrow. They've modified their tactics, his tactical officer reported. The swarm vessels, they're displaying names too. James leaned forward, studying the enemy fleet. Sure enough, the swarm ships bore designations in their own alien script, but something was wrong. The quantum readings were chaotic, discordant. They don't understand, Dr. Elena Martinez said from her station, where she monitored the fleet's quantum resonance patterns. They're trying to replicate the effect without the underlying meaning. It's like trying to speak a language by making random sounds. The swarm fleet approach, their attempts at naming creating a jarring dissonance in the quantum field. Their ships bore designations like Deathbringer and Preyender, simple, brutal concepts without depth or true purpose. All ships, James broadcast to the fleet, remember why you were named. Remember the promises you carry, the hopes you represent, the legacies you protect. Let your names sing. The response was immediate and extraordinary. The quantum field between the fleets began to crystallize with purpose. Each allied ship's resonance pattern strengthened, harmonizing with its neighbors. The Vextheri vessels hummed with ancestral memory. The Meridian ships chimed with crystalline clarity, and the human ships thundered with historical weight. They're attempting to jam our quantum frequencies, Elena reported as the swarm launched their first attack. But they can't. The resonance is too fundamental. You can't jam meaning itself. The battle that followed would be studied for generations. The swarm's superior numbers counted for little against ships that moved with purpose, that fought for something more than survival. The legacy of Aurora led the charge, its name carrying the weight of humanity's first steps into space, their emergence from darkness into light. But it wasn't just combat. As the ships engaged, their quantum signatures began to interact in unexpected ways. The Meridian Crystal's defiant song created harmonics that strengthened nearby vessels. The Vex Theory, Truth's eternal flame, burned through swarm deceptions with literal and metaphysical fire. The Arthuri Roots of Tomorrow generated shields that drew power from the crew's shared vision of the future. The resonance patterns are evolving, Elena announced, her voice filled with wonder. The ships aren't just fighting together. They're creating something new, a quantum symphony of shared purpose. James watched as his fleet moved with unprecedented coordination. The names weren't just labels anymore. They were becoming a new language of reality itself. Each ship's purpose reinforced the others, creating layers of meaning that the swarm couldn't penetrate or comprehend. In the space of an hour, the greatest swarm fleet ever assembled was reduced to scattered remnants. But the true victory wasn't in the destruction. It was in the harmony achieved between species that had once been separated by vast gulfs of understanding. As the battle ended, the Allied ships maintained their formation, their quantum signatures still singing together. On a dozen bridges, crews of different species felt the same thing, a sense of belonging to something greater than themselves, greater even than their individual civilizations. "Send word to the Concordat," James ordered. Tell them we found a new way. The names we give our ships aren't just changing space combat. They're changing us. We're learning to share meaning across the stars." In the aftermath, as damage reports came in and victory celebrations began, Elena made a startling discovery. The quantum resonance patterns hadn't faded after the battle. Instead, they had stabilized into something permanent, a network of shared purpose and understanding that transcended normal spacetime. "The ships," she explained to James later, "they're not just vessels anymore. They're becoming focal points for a new kind of consciousness, one built on shared stories, shared purposes, shared dreams." The swarm observer, watching from the edge of the battlefield, transmitted its final report to the hive mind. The message was simple but profound. The enemy had transcended mere technological advancement. They had discovered how to weaponize meaning itself, and in doing so, had begun to reshape the fundamental nature of space, time, and consciousness. In the vast darkness between the stars, more ships were being named, more purposes defined, more stories woven into the quantum fabric of reality. The galaxy was learning that the most powerful force wasn't technology or numbers. It was meaning freely given and shared across the light years. The swarm didn't just retreat. They evolved. Their hive mind, confronted with the power of meaning itself, made an unprecedented decision. For the first time in their species' history, they sought to understand rather than consume. At the edge of known space, aboard the newly christened Bridge of Understanding, representatives from all spacefaring species gathered for what would become known as the naming conclave. Even the swarm was present, represented by a queen who had chosen an individual name. First Light of Wisdom. Archivist Xarxis, now the leading expert on quantum nomenclature, stood before the assembled delegates. "What we're witnessing isn't just a new form of technology or warfare. It's the universe itself responding to consciousness in ways we never imagined possible." Dr. Elena Martinez stepped forward, her holographic displays showing the intricate quantum webs that now connected named ships across the galaxy. The resonance patterns have stabilized into a permanent network. Every named ship adds to it, strengthening the fabric of shared meaning we've created. But there is danger. First Light of Wisdom clicked, her mandibles moving in newly learned patterns of individual expression. The void between realities grows thin. Our attempts to name without understanding have drawn attention. The assembled delegates murmured as sensor data appeared on the main display. Something was moving in the spaces between normal spacetime, vast, dark shapes that defied comprehension. The quantum network had awakened ancient forces that existed before names had meaning. "They're coming," Sarah Chen announced from her position on the humanity's promise, entities that exist outside our understanding of reality. Our names, our meanings, our purposes, they're an affront to their meaningless existence. The first attack came without warning. Reality itself seemed to tear as vast, nameless things pushed through into normal space. Ships without names or purpose simply ceased to exist in their presence. Even named vessels struggled against the waves of unmeaning that radiated from these entities. All ships, form up, Admiral James Chen commanded. Remember who you are, remember why you were named. Let your purposes shine. The combined fleet moved as one, each ship's quantum signature reinforcing the others. The humanity's promise led the charge, its name carrying the weight of an entire species' determination to protect not just themselves, but all life that sought meaning. The network is adapting, Elena reported, watching as new patterns formed in the quantum web. The ships aren't just fighting individually anymore. They're creating a collective resonance, a shared story. First Light of Wisdom's vessel, newly named Harmony's First Dawn, joined the formation. The Swarm Queen had finally understood what her species had been missing, the power of individual purpose contributing to a greater whole. The battle that followed transcended normal physics. Named ships fought entities that existed beyond normal spacetime, their quantum resonances creating zones where reality itself remained stable against the encroaching chaos. Each vessel's purpose became an anchor point for existence itself. We need something more, Xarxes realized, watching as even the combined fleet struggled. Not just individual names and purposes, but a single, unified meaning. In that moment, Sarah Chen understood what had to be done. All ships, she broadcast, prepare for synchronized quantum resonance. We're going to give this fleet a new name, a shared purpose. Together, through the quantum network, crews of every species joined in an unprecedented moment of shared consciousness. They understood now that the names they gave weren't just labels. They were promises made to reality itself, declarations of what could and should be. The combined fleet, acting as one, received a new designation, Tomorrow's Light. Not just a name, but a quantum declaration of purpose that echoed through space-time itself. The promise of a future where meaning triumphed over chaos, where consciousness shaped reality not through force but through shared understanding. The nameless entities recoiled as the quantum resonance reached unprecedented levels. The Tomorrow's Light didn't just fight, it defined. Each ship became part of a greater story, a narrative so powerful it wrote itself into the fundamental laws of reality. In the end, the entities retreated not because they were defeated, but because they encountered something they couldn't unmake, the power of freely chosen, freely shared purpose. As the quantum disturbances faded, the galaxy had changed forever. The network of named ships had become a new kind of civilization, one built not on borders or species, but on shared meaning and purpose. We didn't just discover a new power source, Elena explained to the reconvened Concordat. We discovered that consciousness, meaning, and reality are more deeply connected than we ever imagined. The names we give shape not just our ships, but our future. In the centuries that followed, the tradition of naming ships became something sacred, not just a ceremony, but a fundamental act of creation. Each new vessel added its story to the quantum network, strengthening the bonds between species and stars. And in the vast darkness between galaxies, reality itself had learned a lesson, that meaning, freely given and shared, was the most powerful force in existence. The human tradition of naming their ships had evolved into something greater, a way for consciousness itself to declare its purpose in an infinite cosmos. The humanity's promise had been kept in ways no one could have predicted. They had shown the galaxy not just how to fight, but how to create meaning itself. And in doing so, they had changed the very nature of existence.